Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, I continue to bring you the story of Hoài Ca and Hùng. Hello everyone, thank you so much for returning to my channel. In today's video, I will continue telling you the story of Hoài Ca and Hùng, a story that doesn't need overly dramatic details or loud, intense twists, yet it lingers in people's hearts because of its warmth, its sincerity, and the very genuine emotions that feel so close to our everyday lives. After spending time together through simple, ordinary days, little by little, the bond between Hoài Ca and the boy Duc has naturally grown stronger. There is no longer the hesitation from the early days, no more invisible distance that once made them unsure in how to address or express their feelings. Instead, there is closeness. A sense of familiarity that feels as if it has existed for a very long time. If before, every time Duc called Hoài Ca, he was still hesitant and chose words that kept a certain distance, now everything has gently changed. The boy can naturally call her mom, no longer shy, no longer uncertain, but with trust and love. A simple word, yet filled with meaning. It is not just a way of addressing someone, but also acceptance, connection, and proof that a child's heart has truly opened and given Hoài Ca a very special place. And every time she hears that word, Hoài Ca cannot help but pause for a few seconds. Not because she is surprised, but because she is deeply moved. She never thought there would be a day when she would hear that word from Duc, so naturally, so closely, and filled with such affection. That is why she cherishes every small moment spent with him even more. There is no need for grand gestures or fancy words, just simple things like sharing a meal, preparing for school together in the morning, or even just a gentle hug from behind, are enough to warm her heart. One morning unfolded like any other. Hoài Ca woke up early, while everything around was still quiet. The small house remained wrapped in the familiar calm of an ordinary morning, where sunlight had not fully filled the space, yet life had already begun moving in its usual rhythm. In the small kitchen, Hoài Ca quietly prepared breakfast. Every movement she made was slow and careful, as if she was putting her whole heart into even the smallest tasks. From choosing ingredients, cooking, to arranging the dining table, everything was done with care. Not only that, she also prepared clothes and checked Duc's school bag, making sure everything was ready for a new day. These tasks might seem repetitive every day, but to Hoài Ca, they are moments worth cherishing. Because in these simple things, she feels more clearly than ever that she is truly a part of Duc's life. And that morning, Duc also woke up in a very cheerful mood. No longer slow or sleepy like many other mornings, the boy quickly ran out of his room and came close to Hoài Ca. Without saying much, he gently hugged her from behind, a very natural action, yet full of emotion. Then he softly said, his voice small but clear, "Mom, I'm going to school early today." Just a simple sentence like that. But it made Hoài Ca pause for a few seconds. She didn't turn around right away, just smiled softly. A smile not too obvious, but enough to show the happiness spreading through her eyes and emotions. Some joys don't need to be expressed loudly. Just a moment like that is enough to stay in the heart for an entire day. After everything was ready, Hoài Ca took Duc to school as usual. The familiar road, the familiar steps, everything happened gently like any other day. Nothing unusual, no sign that today would be any different. After saying goodbye to Duc at the school gate, Hoài Ca returned home and continued with her daily tasks. Everything followed its usual rhythm. The house remained quiet, and every small task was carried out steadily. It seemed like nothing had changed. Until her phone suddenly rang. That familiar sound, for some reason, made her pause slightly. She couldn't explain why, but the moment she saw the incoming call, an unclear feeling rose within her. She quickly answered. On the other end was Duck's teacher. No longer the usual calm tone. The voice carried urgency and a hint of worry that could not be hidden. "Can you come to the school right away? Something just happened to Duck." Just hearing that, all thoughts in Hoài Ca's mind seemed to freeze for a moment. She didn't ask anything else, nor did she have time to think. A wave of anxiety immediately rose, spreading through her chest, making her heart beat slow for a second before racing rapidly again. She rushed out of the house. Her steps became more hurried than ever. On the way to the school, her mind kept spinning with overlapping thoughts. She didn't know what had happened, didn't know what condition Duck was in, and it was exactly that uncertainty that made her worry even greater. Every minute felt longer than usual. Every stretch of road made her wish she could arrive just a little faster. At that moment, there was only one thought left in her mind. She just hoped that Duck was okay. And from that very moment, the peaceful morning seemed to quietly shift, opening up a new turn of events that Hoài Ca could not have foreseen. When she arrived, Hoài Ca barely had time to pause for even a second. She hurried down the familiar school hallway, her heart still racing, her mind focused on only one thing. She needed to see Duck. She needed to know how he was. The door to the medical room opened. And then, she saw Duck. The boy sat there, his small figure seeming to shrink within the larger space. One of his arms was scratched not too deep, but enough to make anyone feel a pang of sympathy. His face looked downcast, no longer carrying the cheerful expression from that morning. His eyes were slightly red, as if he had been holding something back for a long time. In that moment, Hoài Ca couldn't hide her emotions. All the worry she had felt on the way seemed to gather into one point, tightening her chest. She quickly stepped forward, almost running to Duck, then gently sat down beside him. Her hand reached out to touch his, careful and slightly trembling, as if afraid of causing him more pain. "Does it hurt?" Her voice wasn't loud, but it was full of concern. Duck looked at her. He gently shook his head, but his eyes revealed everything. It wasn't the pain from the scratch, but something deeper, harder to name. He stayed silent for a moment, as if wondering whether he should say it or not. Then finally, he spoke softly, his voice small and slightly choked. "I didn't do anything, but they said I pushed them." The sentence wasn't loud, but it made Hoài Ca pause. She understood. What hurt Duck wasn't the scratch on his arm. It was the feeling of being misunderstood. The hurt of not being able to explain himself, or perhaps not knowing how. Her gaze softened for a moment. She hadn't had time to say anything else, when suddenly, a voice came from outside. Not quiet, and clearly filled with sharpness. Another parent walked into the room. That person looked straight at Duck, without hesitation, and immediately spoke in an unfriendly tone. Every word came out quickly and forcefully, as if the conclusion had already been made without needing to hear anything more. They insisted that Duck was the one who caused the trouble. And it didn't stop there. The words became heavier. It was no longer about understanding the situation, but about placing blame. And then, a sentence cut through the air. "Cold. Kids without a mother's upbringing turn out like this." The entire room seemed to freeze. No one spoke for a few seconds. The air suddenly felt heavier than ever. Duck lowered his head. His small hands clenched tightly. He didn't react, didn't argue, didn't cry out loud. But that silence made the pain inside him even more visible. Hoài Ca stood there. She didn't speak immediately. Not because she didn't know what to say, but because, in that moment, her emotions were shifting. From worry to heartbreak, and then gradually into something firm and clear. Her eyes were no longer the same, no longer uncertain, but calm and strong. She stepped forward, not fast, but decisive. Her voice rose, not loud, but clear enough for everyone in the room to hear. "Excuse me, what did you just say?" The other parent didn't seem to notice the change in the atmosphere. Still holding the same attitude. Still continuing with words full of prejudice. And at that moment, Hoài Ca gently took Duc's hand. Not too tightly, but enough to send a clear message. That he was not alone. She looked straight at the other person. Without avoiding. Without hesitation. And said, "Who says this child doesn't have a mother?" A silence followed. This time, deeper. She continued. Her voice still calm, but firmer. "I am his mother." The sentence wasn't long. Not complicated. But it changed everything in the room. The other parent froze. As if unable to react. No more harshness. No more rapid accusations. Only silence remained. And on this side, Duc slowly raised his head. His eyes widened. Not out of fear, but surprise. As if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. He looked at Hoài Ca for a long time, as if trying to confirm that it was real. The atmosphere in the room began to shift. The tension eased. At that moment, the teacher spoke, calmly but clearly, asking everyone to settle down so the situation could be reviewed from the beginning. A few other students were called in. Each account was shared. Each detail pieced together. And gradually, the truth came out. Duc hadn't caused any trouble. He had only been standing nearby when two other students pushed each other. Everything happened too quickly, and the misunderstanding came just as fast. He became the one blamed, even though he wasn't the one who started it. The other parent fell silent, no longer as certain as before. Their gaze softened. Everything slowed down. And eventually, the situation ended the way it should have been understood from the very beginning. But, even though everything was clarified, what had happened still left its mark. As they left the school, Hoài Ca walked beside Duc. The two moved along the familiar road, no longer rushing like before. Everything returned to a slower rhythm. But between them, there was a silence. Duc didn't say anything. He just walked quietly, his eyes looking down. Maybe he was still thinking about what had just happened, about the words he had heard, and perhaps about what Hoài Ca had said in that room. The silence lingered. Not too heavy, but enough to make it clear that something was slowly changing. And within that quiet moment, a new emotion was beginning to form softly, yet unmistakably, continuing what had already started before. And then suddenly, Duc stopped. His steps froze in the middle of the familiar road, as if something inside him had just reached a point where he could no longer keep moving forward. The space around them seemed to quiet down in that very moment, as if all the usual sounds had drifted away, making room for the emotions rising within the boy. Without warning, without any sign, Duc turned back, then wrapped his arms tightly around Hoài Ca. The hug came quickly, but it lasted. This was not the innocent hug from before, not a fleeting moment of a child's joy, but a hug filled with emotions, as if everything he had been holding inside was poured into this single moment. His voice trembled, soft, but enough to make anyone listening feel a deep ache. "I thought I didn't have a mom." The sentence wasn't long, but it carried a sadness that had existed for a long time. It wasn't just about today. It was the accumulation of thoughts, wounds, and empty spaces he had faced throughout the past. In that moment, Hoài Ca froze. Not because she was surprised, but because her heart had been touched somewhere very deep. She didn't speak right away. She stayed still for a few seconds, then gently wrapped her arms around Duc. Her embrace was slower, softer, but steadier, as if it was her answer to everything he had just said. Her voice followed, gentle yet certain. "You do have a mom. You've had one for a long time. No need for further explanation." No need for long words. Just that one sentence was enough to fill the emptiness Duke had carried inside for so long. Tears quietly fell. No sobbing, no noise. Just silent tears rolling down, carrying emotions that couldn't be put into words. It wasn't sadness. It was release. A moment when everything that had been held back for too long was finally let go. Two people stood in the middle of a familiar road. No one said anything more. But in that silence, so much was spoken. A connection, an understanding, and a bond that no longer needed to be named. That afternoon, when Hung returned, everything in the house seemed the same as usual. Nothing had obviously changed, but the atmosphere felt different, quieter, deeper. After hearing the whole story, Hung didn't react immediately. He didn't ask questions. He didn't show his emotions the way others might. He simply stood there, looking at Hoài Ca. His gaze wasn't complicated. There was no doubt, no hesitation. Only one thing was clear: trust and gratitude. Gratitude that Hoài Ca had been there for Duke when he needed it most. Gratitude that she hadn't stayed silent. Gratitude that she stepped forward, not only to protect the boy, but to give him something he may not have truly felt for a long time: the feeling of belonging to a family. Perhaps for Hung, he didn't need anything else to be convinced. No promises, no complicated proof. What had happened that day was already enough. Enough for him to understand that Hoài Ca was not just someone by their side. She had truly become an irreplaceable part of their family. A mother. Not by title, but by the way she chose to love, to protect, and to stay. In a way that felt natural, yet deeply sincere. And perhaps, after everything that had happened, people begin to realize that happiness is not something distant, not something grand, not something dazzling. Sometimes, happiness is simply having someone who is willing to stand up for you when you need it most. Willing to protect you, even when no one asks. Willing to stay by your side, even when things become difficult. And most importantly, having someone who calls you family, not out of obligation, but because they truly want to. If you've watched until this moment, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story. Every story, every moment, every emotion is something real, something close, something that may have existed somewhere in our own lives. If this story has touched your heart, don't forget to like the video to support the channel. Leave a comment and share your thoughts, because your story might also touch someone else. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next stories. Stories that are still continuing, with more emotions, more meaning, and more to look forward to. See you all in the next videos.
Xin chào mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Nay thì mình tiếp tục đưa đến với mọi người video về câu chuyện của Hoài Ca và Hùng nha mọi người. Trong tập hôm nay thì Hoài Ca đã làm một việc rất là ý nghĩa. Như mọi người cũng đã biết thì Hùng có một con trai riêng, đó là bé Đức. Và bé Đức và Hoài Ca dạo này đã sống chung, và mối quan hệ của hai người cũng rất là tốt. Hoài Ca cũng rất yêu thương bé và bảo vệ như chính con trai ruột của mình. Và hôm nay khi mà Đức gặp một chuyện ở trên trường, khi cậu bé Đức bị tổn thương và bị bạn bè coi thường, thì Hoài Ca đã nên họp phụ huynh và bảo vệ cậu bé, cũng làm cho Đức có niềm tin hơn vào tình yêu, cuộc sống, cũng như Hùng yên tâm vì đã chọn đúng người mà lấy làm vợ. Vậy thì liệu mọi chuyện tiếp theo sẽ ra sao? Hãy đón xem những tập sau để biết thêm diễn biến nhé mọi người. Tạm biệt mọi người.